Hello, everyone, and welcome to Film Foundations, a show where we take 4 questions and apply them to a microgenre, franchise, director, or actor. And those 4 questions are going to be answered on this episode. Along with me is my dear friend and one of the other hosts of the show, Disconnected's own Ryan Verrill.
Hey, I am stoked to talk about this. I love me some animation films and eager to jump in.
They're the only animation studio, Ryan. How dare you? There's nobody else. According to the Academy Awards, in the last 15 years, like anytime a Pixar movie gets nominated, it's almost like a shoo-in, unless it's like Shrek. I'm pretty sure. Like Pixar movies have gathered Academy Award after Academy Award after Academy Award for good reason.
Into the Spider-Verse begs the difference.
Yeah, that's the outlier, maybe. I mean, to be fair, Pixar has dominated the animation landscape, I would say, for the most part. I mean, obviously, DreamWorks is in that conversation, but I'm not a Minions guy. So, because that's what that is now, right? Like DreamWorks is Illumination Studios.
Yeah.
Minions, everybody. Cool.
Illumination has turned into this butt of a lot of jokes type of studio, and they don't have a lot of what Pixar has, but we're going to get into a lot of that, I'm sure. Obviously, we are excited to be back for something like this, and most of the topics we've discussed, just the two of us, have been fairly small, very tight, very not a lot of options to choose from. I think this is going to be a really exciting one because there's a wide array of opinions you can have about this. And considering that this has been going strong for multiple decades at this point, there's a lot that we're going to be able to talk.
I mean, from 1995 with the original Toy Story to this year, they will be releasing yet another movie, Inside Out 2, and then the other one I don't think is coming out this year. I think Inside Out 2 is their movie for 2024, which is a sequel, which also is like a weird thing. And that's the thing, like when I think about Pixar, I think about like a lot of original ideas and a lot of time in between sequels that aren't Toy Story. You know what I mean? Because it was Toy Story 1, then Toy Story 2 came out 4 years later, and then Toy Story 3 took like a decade, like 11 years to come out. Like whenever I think of Pixar, like I think of a company that just kind of walks to the beat of their own drum, with or without Disney. Because again, there was a time where they weren't owned by Disney, and then they are owned by Disney again, I'm assuming is what's going on now. And it's weird to me because I think, like you said, this is the last time we did something with any amount was 7 or 6 for the Scream movies, because Edgar Wright has less movies than that. He has less than 6 movies, or just at 6 movies,
somewhere around there. Yeah,
so this is like what, 27 different things, stretching, like you said, 30 years almost at this point.
Yeah, and somewhere around 27, 28 features, lots of shorts, too, that we could actually talk about. They've done some groundbreaking shorts that a lot of those have been nominated for Oscars as well.
Right.
But the big thing is this has been a very, like, public type of company since the mid-90s. And I think they technically got their start before that at doing technology-based things, and then they really became focused as an animation studio in the 90s. But, I mean, they have this history of being associated with Steve Jobs, and he helped them make some savvy business decisions, it sounds like. And then once the partnership with Disney came, it was just head for the hills, take all of the money type of situation, because they have been successful literally since day one. I think through the catalog of what they've put out, there's really only 1 or 2 movies that people would tend to say are, I don't even think people would say they're bad, but they're like, it was a mess sort of release. And everything else has been knocked out of the park, really great reviews, with a few of them getting like over-the-top amazing reviews. Perfect scores on Rotten Tomatoes for the longest times, really high ratings on IMDb. A lot of people that are around our age would say these are some of their favorite animated films of all time. And it's hard to argue with. These are genuinely incredibly well-made films. with some of them, like the newest one that's been released, Elemental. I don't remember the exact number, but they basically came out and said they had to launch the largest number of servers to be able to even animate this film because of how much computing power that it took to make, which is insanity. And the crazy thing, you look at Elemental and you go, yeah, I get it. Like this looks beautiful.
Well, and so, like you mentioned, I mean, obviously the names associated with Pixar, like you mentioned, Steve Jobs already. I mean, Pixar was technically started as part of the Lucasfilm computer division, so George Lucas also had a hand in Pixar. I mean, the people surrounding this company, the names are so well known on their own. But then, like you mentioned, like so many people, I would say our age, but then like, you know, there's still things coming out now, right? And that are, I you know, and again, I know we're gonna have some things to talk about, but for me, I think if I were to reflect on Pixar broadly, it's a company who, like you said, like they've really changed the conversation on animation. They're the reason these kinds of movies exist. And I'm talking about, like we mentioned, Illumination Studios, like stuff like that has to exist only because Pixar exists. And I know Shrek came out, and Shrek's not a Pixar movie, but Shrek probably doesn't come out if Pixar doesn't exist either. I mean, that's the thing. Something would have existed, but not a company that 15 of their 27 movies are in the top, highest grossing animated films of all time. 15 of the 27. That's more than half. So that, I mean, it's just crazy. Like you said, I mean, it is like for people our age, obviously it hits, but I think Pixar has figured out a way to transcend all of those things because I think most of the stories are rather universal. I would agree. True to yourself, it's okay to be different. It's okay. I mean, with like Seeing Red, this is a part of life. Like those kinds, like Pixar does a better job in having these conversations than I think a lot of adults have with their own kids. Like some of these things are like, we'll show you this and maybe this will help understand, like, with Coco, like family members passing away, stuff like that. I mean, those are the things that make Pixar such an important film studio for me, is their ability to tackle in recent movies, not so much in like the original stuff, but in recent movies, they've been really tackling some deep emotional questions that, again, like I'm not saying other studios aren't doing it, but in Despicable Me, they're not. There's no grand musing on anything, like not in the way that I feel Pixar kind of gets that. And I think that they are the animation studio as far as like this kind of stuff for me. As great as DreamWorks is, like there's also Surf's Up and Shark Tale. So Pixar's worst movies are not as bad as, you know what I mean? Like Pixar's worst movies are not nearly as bad as like DreamWorks' worst animated movies. Like Pixar still brings the fire even when the movie's just all right. And there are plenty that I would consider to be just all right. And even to the point, did you even remember this happened? So
I would say the worst of Pixar can compete, at least on an emotional level, with the best from DreamWorks.
Yeah.
The titles that were very meh upon release are up there with the ability to cover more ground, to speak more universally with people than the best of DreamWorks. And I think that's why Pixar's going to have some lasting power. The stuff that they've put out are going to be animation films that are talked about for decades, on par with some of the greatest Disney films of all time, which obviously we're going to probably be talking about some other companies tonight with their animation. And it's hard not to even just sell the way that Pixar has affected the world, even just on like a base level, because the foundation that they built is it's led to this crazy reputation. Like if a Pixar film is coming out, you can bet on it for the most part, and 9 times out of 10 you would be completely accurate. That's going to be a really great film. It's going to be reviewed well. It'll make way more than its budget, and it'll be widely remembered as a fantastic film. How many studios can really say that?
Not very many. And like we said, even their worst movies, which I'm sure will come up, like the ones that people don't necessarily think are as good as the originals, or just like the concept maybe doesn't work, like even those movies are still pretty good. Because again, like I know that The Good Dinosaur wasn't necessarily the most popular movie, but it made a lot of money. Right. Because it's a Pixar movie.
And my least favorite Pixar movie made like one of the most out of the entire studio's history. So, we'll definitely get into it tonight. We'll answer our 4 questions and do some comparisons, because there's a lot of animation out there, and there's a lot of people that get passionate about this specific thing. So eager to hear your answer for these. Let's get into some of these. Obviously, we're around the same age. What was like your first foray into Pixar? Were you there from day one?
I was there from day one. I remember seeing Toy Story when it came out, because that was the other thing early on. Like, the movies came out at Thanksgiving, like the week of Thanksgiving. Toy Story 1 came out November 22nd, 95, which is the week of Thanksgiving. I distinctly remember seeing Toy Story 1 in theaters. I distinctly remember seeing Toy Story 2 in theaters, because we, on Black Friday back in the day, they didn't take kids on shopping trips on Black Friday. Not saying they should or shouldn't now, but they were like, all right, we'll go shopping. The two, my aunt and my mom, you guys take the kids to see a movie and then go to McDonald's afterwards. And for me early on, like you said, you could count on Pixar. Like, you could also count on a Pixar movie coming out essentially every November for like a good stretch of time. So I remember seeing the original Toy Story, I watch it every now and then, and it still fucking holds up. And it holds up because of the two leads, I think the problem with Toy Story is, and this is when we start answering our questions, it'll be like, well, it's more up in the air, because I as much as I love Toy Story, like it's a good movie, but
should we ask our first question then?
I kind of think so, because I think because we have so much room to travel, and frankly, like, I might even it might be a cheat, but I kind of almost have two answers, because there's like a point with Pixar that I feel like is kind of a point of inflection for them, that they start making different kinds of things. And I'm not saying like, Toy Story is not its thing, but like, some of the movies are definitely not trying to do what Toy Story was doing.
Right. Well, I will share that I was there for Toy Story, I believe, in the theater from day one. I was, I think, 8 when it came out. I remember those first few for sure in the theater. I think the second film was Bug's Life, right?
Yeah.
Toy Story, then Bug's Life, and then Toy Story 2. And we're going to get into that. It's wild to me that they did Toy Story, Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, and then no more sequels for 11 years. Everything after that was original for 11 years. That's a big thing for them. And now it seems super commonplace. But, so yeah, I saw Toy Story in theaters, loved it. It was very popular, very successful, made way more than its budget. And yeah, I would agree. I think the voice cast is a big part of that. And we're going to get in one of the other reasons why it was a big part of that. But our first question, of course, what is the best entry point for Pixar? So I will let you take this part away and share what you think is the best part.
I had a really hard time answering this question. I feel like the list gets narrowed down immediately once you take Toy Story, anything past the first one out. You know what I mean? Like, that's 3 movies gone. I could not in good conscience say Toy Story 2 is the best entry point, because you really have to see Toy Story 1. But I don't want to give Toy Story 1 as my answer, because that feels like the obvious choice. For me, at least. Like, again, like Toy Story, like, it's the one that started it all. It's the one that's super important for kind of where this genre of films was going to end up going. But for me, and this is, again, like, I think for me, this is a very popular thing. I don't think that this is some sort of like, oh, I don't see this one coming. For me, I think the best entry point, period, if it's not Toy Story, which again, like, I would concede Toy Story should theoretically be the answer to this question, my answer is Ratatouille. I absolutely love Ratatouille. I do not like Patton Oswalt in anything else, but he's fantastic at Ratatouille.
Wow. That's an interesting best entry point. I think that it's a fantastic movie, and I plan on talking about that in a little bit, actually. It is certainly one of my favorites from the entire catalog, and it was I probably my favorite, actually, for a very long time, until another one came and dethroned it. I was very impressed with Ratatouille, and as it turns out, one of the things about it that was so impressive was it really captures the surroundings really well. And I guess years after, looking into how they did it, is because they went into many of these actual French kitchens and got the brand of everything that they use. They got the design of everything that they use. They got whatever they could out of all these French kitchens and copied them to a T. So it was just 100% accurate. There was nothing that they were, cutting corners with because of budget. There was nothing that they were going to fudge with animation, which they absolutely could have easily for something like this. And instead, they created a magical piece of like merging animation with a really great food movie. And I, being a person that loves food, as anybody watching this on the video might be able to guess, I absolutely adore really good food movies. Like, I love the movie Chef, and it really captures the joy of making some of those movies and making the food for those movies. And Ratatouille, I think, is the only animated film that's ever captured it like this for me.
I mean, that's why I like it, is because I am, like yourself, someone who finds being in the kitchen to be something I enjoy a lot. I don't know if I'd ever want to do it as a job. I mean, I've thought about it, but I love being in the kitchen, and I love this idea in Ratatouille of a animal being in love with the idea of food in a way that is off-putting to the rest of his family, because he's just a mouse, or a rat, I guess. You're just a rat. It doesn't matter. But, like, I love that idea in the movie of, like, sometimes you're not the person who's right, but sometimes you're insanely right. And that's kind of like the story of Ratatouille is it's okay to be different. And in being different, that's okay, because look at how all the other rats in that movie change throughout the course of the movie because of this one character. So that's why I like it. I mean, the message about the food is great. I absolutely love Janine Garofalo. I think she's really good in Ratatouille. Is Will Arnett's also in Ratatouille. It's got Ian Holm. It's got a great cast. That's the other thing. But I think for me, like I said, the idea of it's like in a lot of ways, and this is something that I can compare it to, and I wonder if you would go with this comparison. Ratatouille kind of picked up or not Ratatouille specifically, but like Pixar picked up the mantle from like Rankin and Bass in terms of like telling stories about it's okay to be different, or it's okay to, be a different rat that likes food and enjoys the flavor combinations. Like most of the Pixar movies are about someone not being the same as others. And like that's old school Rankin and Bass, fucking Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and everything like that. You know what I mean? Like, so I for me, Ratatouille is my best entry point, but I can completely understand why it might not work with some people. But I think it has enough of the Toy Story-esque storytelling, but at the same time, it's starting to verge on the real emotional movies that Pixar is going to start releasing soon in this timeline, if not 2 movies down the line. Because Up is like, I mean, I'm not a fan of Up the movie, but I'm a fan of the first 10 minutes of Up because it's heart-wrenching.
I think every human on Earth is a fan of the first 10 minutes of that movie.
I just don't know what else there is in that movie to enjoy. Like, that's the problem. It's such a good opening that it's really hard to be like, well, I want to find out the rest of the movie about a talking dog. What kind of comes out of nowhere. I'm just saying. What about you, though? I want to know what your best entry point answer is. Because like you said, 27 movies is a lot. If you say Cars 3, I'm going to be really surprised.
No, I'm going to ride off of your coattails a little bit because I did the exact same thing. I have 2 titles written down here. The first one is Toy Story with the slash next to it. Like, we have to mention, if you're going to make the choice and somehow you're a human that has never seen any of these and you want a good starting point, this is one of the rare examples where it's not a franchise, but starting from the first one is not a bad idea. It's a really great way to see the evolution of the studio, really great way to see how the emotional undertones have always been there, but then eventually they become the forefront of all of these stories.
They become the literal focus.
Literally, yeah. There's an actual turning point in their filmography where it becomes the main thing. So it is nice, and you're able to see that from the beginning with Toy Story, I think.
It's kind of there. Like, it's kind of there. But yeah. I feel like they didn't want to go there too much because, again, like in 95, they were making movies for kids. Now in 2023 and 24, they're making movies for those adults that were kids and their kids.
Yeah, that's the big thing is you got to see who their competitors were at the time, and that's what they thought they had to cater towards. And now they've built their own genre, basically. They do not need to compete with DreamWorks because it's a completely different event when a Pixar film gets released.
Yes, like literally. Even during the pandemic, it was a big deal. Because didn't Soul just get dropped on streaming during the pandemic?
Soul did, and so did Onward.
Right.
Oh, and so did Luca, actually.
Yeah, I remember that, which is weird. Like, that kind of... I'm not one of those people that's like, gotta go to the movie theater to see movies, because, like, that's just not who I am. I enjoy other things in my house a lot more. But if you go see Indian movies in Lincoln, Nebraska, there's never anybody. But there will always be people there for Pixar movies. I remember when we went and saw Monsters, Inc. in theaters, there were people sitting on the stairs in the movie theater watching the movie. Like, that's how big of a deal these movies are in and of themselves, even as early on as Monsters, Inc., which is 4 movies in. I know, it's fucking You know what the 5th movie was? Finding fucking Nemo. Like, they literally, I mean, again, I talked about this, like, you know, Ridley Scott, not a director I'm a super big fan of, but you can't deny he made 2 amazing movies back to back and has been chasing that dragon ever since. It'd be good if you just made Alien. It would be great if you just made Blade Runner, but can you imagine making both of them? Like, I mean, it's, you know, it's like John, I mean, I've said this on the Culture Cast so many times, like, John Williams has the Superman theme and the Indiana Jones theme and the theme to Star Wars. Oh yeah, and also the theme to fucking Harry Potter that they will literally probably reuse in the HBO show because it's so iconic. And like, that's the thing. How do you make iconic movies? Pixar figured it out clearly from the jump.
Yeah, and to speak on the number of people that saw these, Finding Nemo almost made $1 billion. And when you look at when that was made and how common that was, it wasn't common. Finding Nemo came out in 2003 and made over $940 million. Like, that's wild. I believe they have $4 billion movies and 3 that are from like 800 to $1 billion. So they're on the cusp of 7 films being almost $1 billion, which is insanity these days. That is unheard of. And to do it in 2003, that's a shit ton of money for 2003.
Yeah. Well, and that's like I was saying, like, it's crazy to me how much money these Pixar movies have made. Because again, like I mentioned, in the top 10 movies of highest grossing animated films, it's a lot of Pixar movies. I mean, other than The Lion King, but 50 highest grossing films of all time. I mean, in the top 10 is literally nothing of Pixar, but in the top 20, you have Incredibles 2. And I guess it's what's weird is, like, it's not against like films with actors. It's not, but animated films, it's like they're nobody makes as much money as Pixar, period. Right. Even the fucking Minion movies didn't make that much. Like, the Minion movies are making a couple $100 million, I'm sure, but not $1 billion.
I think they've had 1 or 2 that have crossed $1 billion.
Man, so disappointed.
Those soccer moms really love their Minions.
I get, and you know what? I don't get it, because, like, here's the thing. For me, like, are the Minions more iconic than, like, anything Pixar has created? Fuck no. Like, not a fucking chance in hell. Like, the Minions alone, maybe, but, like, there's an actual human character in those movies. Does anybody actually give a shit? Like, or is it all about the Minions? I guess it's all about them. They got their own goddamn movie, so.
They do. And I believe there's a giant, like, Minion statue or mountain or something decorated in LA that, like, when you're cresting the hill by Universal, you can literally see a giant fucking Minion just looming in the distance.
I believe it. I mean, it's one of the franchises that they based a ride on at Universal, that god-awful Despicable Me ride. Like, that's the thing, but everybody just feels like they're chasing Pixar, right?
Right. That's true. Especially the continued success. That's the biggest thing. Sure,
right.
Sure, you can drop a Minions movie and make, hundreds of millions of dollars, but can you do that for 27, 28 movies? Probably not. So yeah, my entry, the first thing I said was Toy Story, but I really want to highlight one thing about Toy Story before we drive in. Let's leave Toy Story alone for a little while.
Oh, wait. Is this a gag about what you're going to be saying next?
Not at all.
Drive in, wink, wink.
I'm not going to be talking about cars, I promise.
Wow, I'm a little disappointed.
When you go back in 2024 and watch Toy Story, that animation is really bad compared.
It's rough, man. Ain't it rough?
It is hard to look at. And like the characters, they got really decent for the most part, but the background, Sid's dog is awful. The human characters are fucking abysmally animated then. But at the same time, this was the first real computer animated film. This was a big deal for when it came out. So I get it that it wasn't going to be perfect. And even this competes with a lot of the DreamWorks stuff that was computer animated years later. This is better than a lot of that stuff. So it's one of those things where, like, I can see to my kids, they don't love to watch a lot of the really old Disney stuff unless it's a story that captures them in the first couple moments, because they don't like that type of animation. It just doesn't appeal to their eyes for some reason.
Well, I get it.
They're YouTube trained.
Oh, it's all about the TikTok, folks. I mean, I don't disagree. That's the thing. I watched all those Disney movies growing up, but then at some point I stopped watching them and I watched Pixar movies. Like, I can't tell you how many times in middle school I saw Finding Nemo. Like, that was such a big deal for like 2 or 3 years that's like all they ever showed at. Like, anytime it was like, well, we have a sub today, we'll show Finding Nemo. It's like, I don't want to watch Finding Nemo ever again. I've seen it that many times. But that, to your point, is like, you don't get to that point in the world if you haven't like proliferated immensely. And Pixar had by that time, but Finding Nemo is another one where it's just like, it made waves and they had already made waves. Like, that's crazy to me. Because like Finding Nemo and Monsters, Inc. are in the first 5 movies that they make, the first 10 that they make.
Yeah, that's insane. So my actual answer here is not going to be Toy Story, but I think the best way to do this is to capture the classic Pixar and the current iteration. And I think the current iteration, you have to lean on something that is emotionally focused, that has great music in it, that has really wonderful voice acting. But really, the last 8 or 9 years, they've also started to focus on bringing light to these underserved cultures and communities. And so my pick here is one that we both love and have talked about slightly before. I got to go with Coco.
Oh, man, don't do that to me.
I have to.
I know.
I think that this
is a hard movie to even think about. Do you know what I mean?
It is.
It's like, I do cry on a daily basis because I feel like it's healthy, and I think it is. But like Coco, I cannot watch it. And I'm pretty emotionally in tune with myself, but I can't imagine rewatching Coco.
I've seen it probably 8 to 12 times because of my kids, and every time I get stuck in this emotional rut of, God damn, this is a wonderful movie, and the characters in it are so... I mean, the funny thing is they're both so likable and so hateable. There are certain characters in this that you go, fuck, you are an awful, awful person. And it doesn't shy away from saying that either. And there are a lot of movies that are ambiguous for that for kids, and they keep some of this ambiguous because there are some things that are good about some characters and some that are really bad. But man, when they are bad, they are really bad. And obviously the animation in this is gorgeous, some of the best of all time. The music in this is stupendous. It's a music-centered story, just like Soul, so you got that going for it. This one, to me, in 2024, I think is the best way to bridge that gap from the classic to the current iteration of Pixar, and it's something that I almost think should be required viewing for a lot of people.
I'm not surprised. I mean, I'm not surprised you picked Coco only because like we've talked about it before, but I mean, yeah, it would hit you. I think it would hit anybody. Like, yeah. So that, I mean, yeah, and that's why I have not rewatched it. I have seen it literally one time. I won't do it again. Like, I know what happened when I watched it, and like it is one of those movies that like it knows what it's doing. And is it manipulative? Sure, but like it's a Pixar movie, so I kind of don't care.
Right.
I thought you were gonna say WALL-E. Like, I really was like, is he gonna fucking say WALL-E? Like, what the fuck? I mean, I don't dislike WALL-E. Don't get what I'm saying is like I dislike WALL-E, but like, whose favorite Pixar movie is WALL-E? That's what I want.
I'm sure there's lots of people that have it as a favorite, but yeah. It is certainly not me. I think that it's a really great curio piece in the catalog, but it's for me it's not top 5 or 8 even, probably.
No. Yeah, but it's weird, like, because that for me was also one of those starting points of like trying to have more of a message and being emotional, because like the whole thing is about 2 robots finding love, right? But I think, I mean, again, like I think you're right in terms of when the franchise or the company turned. I will say like Ratatouille and Up and in my opinion Toy Story 3, like those 3 movies, they probably belong later in their filmography. Like they're out of place there, and you can feel it with something like Up, because Up doesn't commit the way Inside Out does. The way, I mean, so many of these late Pixar movies that are all about emotion, it doesn't go all in on any of that. It like has 10 minutes and that's it, and it's the best part of the movie. But literally now, 15 years later, they're doing that 15 minutes as the whole movie. Like literally. Right. Like you mentioned, I want to talk about a random example, but Encanto, which is not a Pixar movie, it's a Disney movie. I've never seen nothing happen in a movie for an entire movie. Nothing happens. And it was like, Pixar can do that well, Disney can't. and I know that might sound like sacrilege to some people about Encanto, but for me, Coco is the better version of what Encanto has to say.
100%.
And that's because it's a fucking Pixar movie, and they're the ones who know how to do this. Like the other movies I think about with Disney's like direct influence, like who fucking, what's it called? What's the, oh God, I'm blanking. Frozen. Like, what's the message of Frozen?
That's, it's a good question. It comes across as a very feminist movie, which, not a bad thing, obviously,
No.
but the
right?
I don't know.
Right? And that's my point. Like, the second Frozen, I could kind of see what they were going for, but like Frozen and so many of these other Disney movies, they just don't have that emotional heart that Pixar does, because they're trying to chase Pixar, and Pixar's part of Disney. But you know what I mean? Like, it always feels like any of these other animated movies are trying to chase down the ease with which Pixar can just present a serious story and do it well. And it not feel super serious either. Like, Inside Out has a pretty interesting message, but it, like, in a lot of ways, not a fucking kids movie at all. Like, they're not making movies for kids in a lot of ways. Like, they're really not. Like, kids can watch them and appreciate them, but I think it requires time, distance, and age to really start to appreciate some of their later movies.
There's so many things I want to say back to everything you just said. First, I think they are making movies for kids through Pixar, but the biggest thing is I think Disney was only making movies for kids. Right. And with Pixar, we're going to make movies for kids that when you watch it at age 7, you'll love it. When you watch it at age 13, you'll go, huh. And when you watch it at age 23, you go, oh, shit. Right. That's what I was watching the entire time. So they're more of a timeless story. I know we're going to get pushback on the whole Disney doesn't have the emotional core. So I will say, I clearly Disney does have an emotional core in many of their movies. You know, Scar being killed, that's a big deal. Child losing, whatever.
Bro, that's the 90s, man.
I understand. Hold on.
I think your argument's valid if we're talking pre now.
Okay, so even then, like Tangled, there is all kinds of great emotions tied up in that. In fact, I would say Tangled is the best animated and maybe even competing with all live action depiction of a true narcissistic mother-child relationship, even though it's not technically mother. But it's a really great story for people that came from broken households. So I will say that many of these, the Disney films, they have the emotional component, but it's so surface level. It's like they don't trust their audience to put any two concepts together. It's we're going to give you just a touch of it and never dig into that further. And Pixar, in almost every film, has been able to do that, even the ones that are pre, 2012 or so. And honestly, you kind of just named the movie that I think was the big turning point. And it's funny because what the movie's about, I think Inside Out was the emotional turning point for Pixar, is they took this movie that literally explains emotions in one of the best and easiest to understand forms for anybody, and lays that out in a film that you can watch and be just so almost emotionally manipulated by, because you are finally able to understand things. I mean, there are psychologists, and I say this as somebody that's a psychology major, that have been like chasing the ability to share understanding emotions with neurodivergent children and adults that could not do it nearly as well as Pixar did in Inside Out. It is such a simple way to go, listen, you have a handful of emotions that are duking it out for your attention, and this is how they react. How are you going to control them? And that sets the tone for the next decade of what they've been doing. And Inside Out came out in 2015, and everything since then that they've released has been, other than, I think The Good Dinosaur came out in the same year. They were clearly working on that already. But everything else since then, there's tragedy, there's loss, there's, this sense of being othered. There's this hyper focus on very micro communities. And you mentioned Turning Red earlier. One of the best things about Turning Red is if you happen to be a female 12-year-old Asian living in Canada, Pixar literally made you as an individual a film and said, here, please watch this. How much better does it get than that?
Well, that's, to your point, and I was just sitting here perusing their list, even The Good Dinosaur wasn't negatively reviewed. It got middle of the road to positive reviews. But
Right.
but like you mentioned, like when you have something like Inside Out come out the same year, and I will tell you, I just recently saw Inside Out for the first time in the last month, like in the literal last month. And you know what? The emotional part is fine, but like nothing else really happens. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying like things don't happen, but in a lot of ways, like if you're going to make a movie tackling these topics broadly, if you want to, or more specifically, I feel like you kind of, sort of have to, and this is again just me, understand that sometimes these things can't necessarily lead to fun action scenes.
Right.
And Encanto is like, for me, I literally, like, I got done watching it with a friend of mine, and I was like, it's not that I didn't enjoy it, because it was fine. It's so Lin-Manuel Miranda, it fucking hurts. But what the thing about it was like nothing happened. Like they were just like people locked in a house the entire movie. And it's weird because again, like with something like Inside Out, I feel like they nailed Inside Out more than they nailed Encanto in terms of like animation. Because again, I feel like Inside Out has more important things to say, and Encanto kind of doesn't have anything to say. Is what it feels like. Like it's trying to be like, we're a family and we're all different and that's fine. Like Pixar's already done that like 5 times over. Like it's weird to me is what I'm saying. Cause like Disney is seemingly competing with Pixar, but like you mentioned, even they aren't able to do the Pixar thing. Only Pixar really is. Not even, I mean, again, like even when Disney does do it with Frozen or Frozen 2, what's the emotional core of those movies? They never confirmed that Elsa is a lesbian, which would have been a big deal, right? Like that would have been like, okay, well now it's a thing. Now it has emotional core. But like, I guarantee you Pixar will do a gay lead at some point. If not Riley, the character from Inside Out, being possibly non-binary in the new movie, who knows? Like, again, like that's another thing that people have talked about. But again, like you mentioned, Disney, it's all surface level for the most part.
Yeah, and you keep throwing out Encanto. I think Encanto is the clearest form of Disney trying to be Pixar,
right?
And it does not work well for them. I will say I enjoyed Encanto. I thought the music was fun. The thing is, Disney needs plot, and Pixar has proven time and time again that they don't need plot. I mean, Pixar has made
not the most complicated one, that's for sure.
Pixar has made a handful of movies that are literally art films. I mean, Inside Out is pretty close to an art film. WALL-E is 100% an art film. There are a few of these that are made that, sure, story-wise, not a lot happens, but when you compare it to any of their super early Pixar films, they are still, infinitely more deep of a story. WALL-E literally bridging the gap between the end of humanity and finding new life is such a Pixar story to do that with a full-length feature and then go out and sell it to so many people that it makes over $500 million. That is insanity. Like, they bottled up this art film and sold it to society. They said, cool, we love it. And Disney can't really do that. The only one that really was there was Fantasia. And back in the day, that was the big deal, is, oh my God, this is animation, everybody's singing, and this is drawn, and we're watching in a movie theater. This is all brand new. I mean, that sure, they could do it then. You can't get away with that in 2024.
No. And again, like, that's kind of what's so interesting about Pixar is they can get away with it, even when their movies aren't that good. So my question to you is, what is your deep cut? Because we've got a lot of room here, 27 movies. Inside Out 2. I'm calling my Babe Ruthing it right now. Call my shot, it's going to be a good movie. I mean, this is more than 0% chance it's a good movie, right?
So this is probably going to be a very short part of the conversation, but what's funny is my deep cut was Ratatouille. This is the one, it was my favorite for so long that I think it's the perfect way to bridge people that loved other animation companies and came into Pixar and said, I just want a little bit more. And so it's got the talking animals. It's got the animals that interact with humans. It's got the storyline that you can fall into. It's not quite as emotional as what we're going to hit in the mid 2010s to the rest of it. However, there is still some emotion, and it's drawn really well. Like, this is one of the best animated, like, the actual animation is one of my favorites of all time. It's gorgeous to look at. So I think for me, this is a really good deep cut. And the funny thing is the way that they've just been able to permeate all of like the ongoing zeitgeist surrounding film, there's not really much of a deep cut with Pixar. So choosing a deep cut, you have to really think about ones that people tend to not see. And if you're just looking at theatrically, Ratatouille did very well. It made over $600 million.
I saw it in theaters. I saw that thing in theaters.
Like, it made a hell of a lot more than A Bug's Life, but times were different from when A Bug's Life came out and when Ratatouille came out. Because A Bug's Life came out in 98, Ratatouille came out, I think, 2007, and, you know, A Bug's Life got a PlayStation game.
That is wild to me that there are video games about movies like Ratatouille, because like, what? I remember playing it, but I remember it being like, run away from someone as a mouse, collect cheese as a mouse. And it's like, you do realize that they can't do this anymore. Like, there's no way to make a video game off of
Soul.
Fuck me, yeah, Soul or Turning Red or I guess Onward maybe, but like a lot of these movies, like, or Coco, a video game of Coco. Let's see what that would look like. Like, it's, to me, it's kind of nuts because again, like Pixar's stuff, by my approximation, really is like not serious, but at the core of it, the people that are writing these stories are trying to manipulate you emotionally, but nobody complains because it's Pixar, which is fine.
Could you imagine, though, a wonderfully animated next-gen open-world game for Coco on Xbox Series X, and it's beautiful. You can go anywhere that you want in this area. Man, that would be...
Press F to cry. Press F to cry. Press F to
That's the entire game.
Yeah. Interesting answer, though. I mean, I guess I'm sorry I stole your thunder unironically.
Not at all.
Do you want to know? So here's the funny thing, though. You kind of stole my thunder because my deep cut answer is A Bug's Life.
Oh, nice.
I absolutely I love Bug's Life is you know what? I'll just say it right here. Bug's Life is probably my favorite Pixar movie.
Interesting. How come?
I don't know. Like, I've seen it so many times. I love Dave Foley as Flick. I mean, I love
Nice.
all the voice actors are great. I mean, you literally have like a traveling troupe, and it's like Madeline Kahn and David Hyde Pierce and who else? I mean Kevin Spacey, but you know, less said about that the better. Dennis Leary also as the Ladybug, like, and then again the other characters like a Julia Louis-Dreyfus, like I mentioned, Dave Foley, Hayden Panettiere, who less we say about her as an actress, the better. She's not someone I resonate with, but I mean, again, to even mention like Madeline Kahn or Bonnie Hunt is in the movie, like it has a really weird cast, but it also has a really good message, which is like it's okay to fuck up. It's okay to fuck up, and your fuck-ups do not define you.
Right.
And, like, that, for me, is, like, it's such a good message for Bug's Life, and, like, I think for life in general, and, like, just, you know, do not let your failures define you, because that's the character of Flick, like, and they think he's a fuck-up because, I mean, he kind of is, but he saves the day in the end, or that giant bird does. But I don't know, Bug's Life has resonated with me since the first time I saw it in theaters. I am one of those fucking weirdos who is really sad that you can't go on the Bug's Life ride at Disney anymore, which was like a theater show, and they have like bugs dropping from the rafters and water being shot in your face. Like I missed that. I genuinely love A Bug's Life. Speaking of video games, I had the Bug's Life game on PS1.
It was so difficult.
I remember the thing with the fucking dandelion thing where you got to cross the canyon. Yeah. That, I mean, like everything about Bug's Life is it hit me at the right time. I would have been 8 years old. And I remember seeing it in theaters. And you know what? You mentioned it already, and I want to come back to it. How the fuck has there never been a sequel to A Bug's Life?
Right.
Like, I don't get it. I get it, but like, it made like fucking $360 million. It made back its budget and then some. But no, it's
as the second film from a studio.
I know. Isn't the crazy part? I guess, you know what it feels like? It feels like maybe John Lasseter just didn't have any interest in working on that story any further. Because again, this is him directing it. He's one of the writers as well. And he worked on Toy Story 1, Toy Story 2, Toy Story 3. He worked on the story, but he didn't direct it. Like, John Lasseter early on was really helming the ship. I just really don't understand why we never got Bug's Life 2. Again, maybe there's nothing else to say, but I find that hard to believe.
I will say I had written down some notes about individual films that I wanted to drop in just so I didn't forget. What I had written down for Bug's Life, I think hands down, this is their funniest film by far. The jokes in this movie hit, and they hit hard. Yeah. They're funny for every age. They have everything from poo-poo platter jokes to like old school circus references that are interesting to the eyes and everything. I've always loved this movie as well. I think that the fact that this is their second film and you follow up Toy Story with this wild of an idea, like hats off to them. This was risky and really, really smart at the same time. And I would have loved to have seen this, expand in some sort of way.
And again, like with the message of what it is, like, don't let your fuck ups define you. Like, you're not a failure just because you failed. Like, tell me that's not a message we need in 2024. Right. Like, tell me that's not a message that more people need to hear. Because again, like, yes, Inside Out is great, but I mean, these messages have been here since the second movie, since the first movie, really. But a lot of this is very, Aesop fable inspired, obviously. Yeah. So like some of that comes from it. But again, like, you can watch this, have no idea the Aesop story, and enjoy it because again, like, it's a good movie. And the voice actors are great. And I can't believe that I'm saying A Bug's Life is a deep cut. It's honestly blowing my mind here. Like, Bug's Life for me is really like a seminal film. Like, there was something about it then. There's something about it now that I absolutely love. And the animation in Bug's Life ain't much better than Toy Story. Like, it's just as rough in a lot of ways.
It is pretty rough. But one thing that is very interesting and probably should point out about this is it lends itself very well to animation because it's such a perspective-driven idea.
Right.
When you're talking about literal bugs and anything that you draw has to be massive compared to them, first off, it's a little easier to animate because a blade of grass is suddenly half the frame. But beyond that, it allows you to do interesting ideas that you don't have to worry about filming something. So it makes it more compelling to do as an animated film. And so for a lot of us that grew up on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids that were mystified by that, tiny people in a large situation, this scratched that itch for a lot of us. A lot of the perspectives that you see here are identical to what we saw in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Well, and that's the other thing, they did the Toy Story thing where it's like, what are toys up to when you're not around? And then Bug's Life is just like, it feels like they're answering the similar question, right? Like, what are the bugs up to? What makes a bug a bug? And like, okay, for me, like, that is a question worth answering. And to have this idea of like, these are bugs, but they have autonomy and they have hopes and dreams just like human beings. I don't know, probably Pixar has done more for people softening their feelings on like animals and bugs and weird stuff because again, they've anthropomorphized so many things at this point. Toys and bugs, obviously. But
emotions, elements.
Yeah, like they've anthropomorphized so many things. But again, it starts here with Bug's Life and Toy Story. I just can't believe I'm being like, oh, Bug's Life is a deep cut. But I guess it is. Like, I don't know if you went, like, have your kids seen Bug's Life?
I believe they have, but I may be wrong.
It just doesn't seem like a thing that would play for kids today. Like, it'd be like, this is boring, which I would get.
That's a good question.
Because, like, again, like, I may even go as far as to say not a whole lot happens in Bug's Life either. Like, realistically, like, Flick goes to the city, Flick comes back, the circus people perform. It's like, it's not so much happens in Frozen. Do you know what I mean? Like, so much stuff is just constantly happening. And so much of Pixar early on is like, we're just going to let it sit and do its thing for a while.
I don't know if I agree. I feel like Bug's Life is very plot driven. It's just, I don't know. It's more, it feels more contained perhaps in its plot, and it's done in a way that not to be, hyper, let's analyze cinema like they did in the Dogma 95 movement or anything like that. But it does feel very like of the moment, just snapshot of this community's life for a couple days. And if you can pull that off with animation, that's great. And the fact that they can make it emotional in the process and deliver the classic, Disney sort of morality tale at the same time, fantastic. We just keep getting that in a really perfectly laid out package.
Well, and who doesn't love a movie where Kevin Spacey's the villain?
Very poetic.
Yeah, right. Well, and you know what? The other thing, I think this is one of, because Randy Newman only comes back for like Toy Story and Monsters Inc. and like Cars, I guess. But he did the story, like the music for Bug's Life. And again, it sounds like a Randy Newman song. We should probably mention Randy Newman is a pretty big part of the Pixar thing, especially, like Toy Story. I always forget Toy Story has like a song with it. You know what I mean? It's like, that's how big of a deal Toy Story was. It had a fucking song that like everybody knows. It's part of I think it's part of the permanent zeitgeist in a way.
Yeah, there's absolutely going to be people that will never, ever, ever see this movie that will be able to quote that song.
Right. Yeah. You've got a friend in me is like that in my mind is the equivalent of like When You Wish Upon a Star. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not discounting The Lion King. Lion King's great. I know everybody likes The Lion King, but Lion King's music for me is just fine. Like, it's just fine. Like, there are good songs, but how many times have I heard them in my lifetime? You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing about Disney. Like, you really can't escape some of these things. Like, You've Got a Friend in Me, or When You Wish Upon a Star, or
right.
So, I mean, so many other things. Under the Sea, like we could just name things that like I feel like most people know.
There's like 7 songs just from Lion King that are that popular.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing, like remembering Bug's Life, like Bug's Life has a song with it, but it's different. It's not, it doesn't have the song that everybody remembers. That's probably why it's gotten forgotten a little bit, because it just doesn't have the marketability.
Are there songs for any of these other films until we get to like Coco that are memorable? I don't remember Bug's Life having a memorable song. I remember Monsters, Inc. having a memorable song. Finding Nemo, Incredibles,
right?
Ratatouille, even. I don't remember a memorable song for any of these.
Right, but like Randy Newman did songs. I mean, the thing is, the Randy Newman song in Bug's Life is the one that they perform at the end of the movie. The time of your life, but use it well. I mean, like that's a pretty bad Randy Newman, but
I mean, it sounded like the beginning of the Full House theme song.
Here's a bug, tiny bug. I like bugs. That's the fucking Will Sasso Randy Newman that he does. Who wants to go get tacos? I'm buying. Let me melt down some of my fucking Emmys or Oscars or whatever. Randy Newman has Oscars and Emmys, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And probably Grammys too.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like those early movies really also benefit from the music. Like Toy Story has The Thing. So Bug's Life doesn't. So yeah, deep cut Bug's Life.
Well, and that's the thing. Like I was saying, in the 90s, they felt they had to compete with Disney. They hadn't created this new genre that is, quote, Pixar films, unquote, just yet.
Right.
Because now they need memorable songs. They need relatable characters for children. So Toy Story, literal toys. I mean, what's more relatable than toys? All kids can relate to that.
And even adults. Like, even adults can relate to, like, your toys that you left behind. Like, because part of that's I mean, that's what makes Toy Story such a good movie, is that it has that cross appeal of, well, you're a kid, you're playing with toys, but also like adults played with toys too because they were kids. Like that, it's such a smart way to tell the story. Yeah, you just keep talking about Toy Story. Just keep talking about Toy Story.
Well, on that note, then, I think we should probably go to our third question, which I feel like this one, to me, it was really obvious, but I'm very curious to hear what you say. And that one is, what is Pixar's biggest impact on pop culture? So take it away, Chris.
I honestly think that Pixar's biggest impact on pop culture is Toy Story. Like, and the creation, I mean, like, Toy Story is a moment in time for so many things. For the beginning of, like, animated films, for the beginning of, like, CGI animated, the beginning of, again, like we've already mentioned, Pixar doing this as a thing for a full movie. That's the first one. But at the same time, it's so many other things. Like, it was such a thing that wasn't a thing. And now it's everything all the time. Like, everything that is animated like this comes from Toy Story. And so I feel like Toy Story is the franchise that we keep checking in on as fans of Pixar, because we've seen Toy Story 1 and 2, but then took a really long time for 3, took a pretty long time for 4 as well. But those characters are so, I don't know, they're so part of, like, Buzz Lightyear and Woody are so ubiquitous. Like, I feel like it, not maybe like Jesus or Coca-Cola levels, but like, I don't not think that. They've only done 4 movies of one thing, and that's Toy Story. You know, like, the way I look at it is, like, it's obvious to me what the pop culture impact is introducing the world to the world of Toy Story. But, like, I think you could just say broadly, it's introducing the world to this kind of animation and doing it seriously, not just like a gag that is there to entertain kids and the adults are just bored out of their fucking minds.
So I agree with you, and that's I'm gonna share my first thing, because I did list 2 things. The second one I wanted to say is a joke, but now with what you said, it kind of works. The first thing I want to say is my real answer here is they impacted pop culture by signaling the end of hand-drawn animation. And good thing, bad thing, I don't think it's an argument either way, really. Hand-drawn animation can be great. It also is very convenient to be able to click undo on a computer program. So I totally get it. It is something that was inevitable to change like this. And I think it opens up our ability to make these things on a worldwide scale rather than a handful of old dudes sitting in some crazy studio in Florida hammering out some film for like 9 months and then coming out of it depressed and underpaid and just awfully treated because they don't get to work from wherever they want, basically. So hand-drawn animation can be great. It can be something that leaves a little bit more to be desired, but I think the fact that this came in and nailed the first film as a, completely CGI animated film, it really can't be overstated how much this was a big deal, because it's a very stark contrast to what Disney was doing in the mid-90s. Stark contrast.
Yeah, there's some CGI in Beauty and the Beast, but it's like one scene, and that's it. Like, this really just feels like a moment in time where it's like, this is going to be a thing now. And it has been, still is. Like, and Toy Story started that. So what's your joke answer? What's the joke answer? I want to know what, like, the snide answer was.
I mean, it comes across as a joke, but it's actually something that you could really argue that this is the case, and that is the fact. Be a joke. Then
this can't be a joke. Come on.
The answer should be Cars. I mean, in all reality, Cars is a crazy worldwide phenomenon. I don't love this franchise at all, but the fact that you can find Cars references everywhere. There's crazy conspiracy theory videos on YouTube. There's characters that you can purchase on every single possible merchandising opportunity. There's a Cars land at Disneyland. It takes a lot.
True. That is true.
It takes a lot to be able to have that sort of an impact. And people forget, like, when the first Cars movie came out, it was still in the heyday of home video. So Cars made a decent amount of money. It didn't make huge numbers. The first Cars didn't even make 500 million, which didn't even, that's such a funny way to say that. But the home video market for Cars was huge. Kids that were, 4 to 8 when Cars came out, ate that film up on DVD for so long. They got immediate fans out of everybody, which is why Cars 2 had to go into production so quickly. And they got that thing out, a good 5 years later after the first Cars. And Cars 2 is arguably, in my opinion, the worst movie in the entire Pixar catalog. And yet,
I've never seen it.
It still made more than the first Cars film, which is crazy. It's, other than Toy Story, it's got the most amount of sequels. It's got 3 films out there. It's got a lasting empire, basically, over multiple generations now. I mean, Cars 3 came out way later than Cars 1. Cars is in 2006. Cars 3 is 2017. And you have these characters that have turned into, Lightning McQueen is everywhere. Tow Mater is everywhere. You have all of these people that are growing up with these films, and now references to Cars are in TV shows and films, and it's just one of those things that it's a franchise that somehow grabbed the world and did not let go. It's, as in my opinion, I'm not saying it's as good, but I think it had as big of an impact as Toy Story did overall.
I mean, I play Rocket League on my PC. And there was a Lightning McQueen skin that you could buy that's actually him. It has a goal celebration that says "Ka-chow." The thing that I bought, just because it is really triggering when other people have to hear it when you score a goal, is Rascal Flatts' "Life is a Highway," which is a really, roast me all you want, but that song, like, it's such a fucking, I do not like that song. It's such a, like, it is in so many ways just like saccharine nonsense, but again, to your point, like, Cars was such a thing that, like, that was a big, that's a big deal for Rascal Flatts, that song. Like, it was a big deal that was a song that came out with that movie. Like, Life is a Highway was Cars 1, right?
Yep.
I haven't seen anything past Cars 1. I heard Cars 2 was not great, and then Cars 3, like, the trailer for it just looked so bizarre. Like,
it looks so serious. I've still not seen Cars 3.
It supposedly was.
I mean, it's Pixar in their emotional era, so I don't doubt that it is serious. But Cars 2 came out, and it's this bizarre spy film, and you're like, we're like spoofing James Bond with talking cars. That seems like a really strange choice from Pixar.
Michael Caine is in that one, right?
He is, yeah.
Michael Caine. I would, like, kill to have, like, a Cars movie that's set in, like, the James Bond universe, because there's so many car things in that, where it's just like, this is James Bond's car. So I'm assuming it's like a poor facsimile of that. or a poor interpretation of something that could be cool, you know. Yeah, that is right. Cars does have 3. And Toy Story might have 5 at some point. Probably will end up having 6 as
I wouldn't
well.
doubt it, yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't disagree. I think so much of this is like, you know, digging through the dirt, like you get different striations of things. And like, to your point, like, I think what you were answering about with Cars is the same thing I'm saying with Toy Story. It's just like something about these characters imprinted on people. And like, you know what? I'm not saying Finding Nemo doesn't have that, but it doesn't. Like, it doesn't. Monsters, Inc. does, like, big time. But like, Nemo's so weird because in a lot of ways, it works in spite of it being it is a very late Pixar movie being made very early on. Like, Finding Nemo would feel a lot more at home in like 2010. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no music. Is there a musical number in fucking Finding Nemo that anybody remembers? Like, not really, but it has an amazing cast.
Yeah. And what I was going to say is I think that's why Finding Dory was such a, smash hit. Because not only was it like nostalgia for that first one coming out, but it was one of those things where people went, oh, like these characters were important to me for a long time and I want to see them again. But goddamn, like it is the Finding Nemo in the late era Pixar that could really hit hard. And it's a really good movie. And honestly, it's kind of the exact same movie as the first one, to be frank.
I've seen that movie one time, Finding Dory. I remember crying at the part where she figures out who she is or whatever. I don't remember it very well. And that's the thing, like the sequels to the movies, I really didn't go out of my way to see. Like, I've not seen The Incredibles 2. I've seen The Incredibles, but I'm not going to... You want to have a hot take? I do not like The Incredibles. I find it to be something... Whoa. Yeah, it's not something I really resonate with.
Are you normally a Brad Bird person? Do you like this other stuff?
That's the thing. I think he's fine as a director. Just for me, something about The Incredibles just doesn't... I get what they're going for, and I think that that's an interesting conversation to have about like superheroes in the real world. It's just the way Pixar implements it for me. It's just, I don't know, with all the movie stuff that real live action superhero movies we get, it kind of feels like a conversation that's been had a bunch now, and they're just trying to figure out a way to insert themselves.
Well, even then, The Incredibles came out in 2004. Spy Kids came out first in 2001. It's basically the same movie.
Ooh, that's fair. Yeah. I have no hatred for The Incredibles. It's just not... That franchise is my least favorite of the stuff Pixar has done, for sure.
Interesting. Yeah, I think Cars is that for me, just because I'm not, I don't know, I'm not caught up in the fervor of Cars at all. I really enjoyed The Incredibles. The second one was good. It wasn't like upper echelon for me. But yeah, I don't think there's any other franchises for Pixar that I, even looked down on. But
and technically there have been, 5 Toy Story movies? Isn't Lightyear technically a Toy Story movie?
Well, not only that, I think Toy Story is the only one that they've made things that are like mid-length films. They've got the Treehouse of Terror or whatever they did, and then they've got one more. And I think they're both around 20 to 25 minutes, which the fact that they've put that much into Toy Story shows how much it's meaningful to them.
Right. Yeah. I cannot agree more. Like, I feel like Toy Story is like the crown jewel in their crown. Like, it is the center stone. And I genuinely don't think we're going to go another 10 years without another Toy Story. Like, I'd be surprised. As long as Hanks
just got Lightyear, like you just said.
Right. But that was the thing. Like, did nobody go and see Lightyear? Like, again, I think people didn't understand what it was because it sounded meta, like very oddly meta, which, I mean, again, like that's probably Pixar doing it is interesting. But for me, it's like, I don't know if I want to watch a movie about the real person that the toy is based on.
It wasn't that good anyway.
Yeah, that's just weird. Honestly, the weirdest thing is that it's a Pixar movie. I kind of thought it was a Walt Disney animation movie. But I guess if you're doing Toy Story, it has to be Pixar, right?
That's true. And to reiterate my point about the animation thing, the fact that Pixar came in 95 and said, look at us, we're not going to do any hand-drawn animation. Every film that we're putting out is going to be computer-generated. And they did that starting in 95. Disney's last hand-drawn animation film was 2009. So they held on way longer after Pixar came onto the scene. And not that that's a bad thing at all, but the fact that they still kept doing it. It was great for them. It worked for them. But it just shows like Pixar grabbed a hold of this early. And I think that was the thing is without Pixar forcing that, I don't think some of these other studios would have went there. Even like now, I bet we'd still have a lot of hand-drawn animation if Pixar never started.
I agree. I mean, there is no Shrek without Toy Story. I mean, really. I mean, it's just that you could see, like you said, you could see the ways that it has kind of hopped. I will say another weird thing about these Pixar movies that, again, I think can't be overstated is almost all of them are certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. They have a public score on CinemaScore of A. All of them have an A or an A plus or an A minus. There's nothing lower than that. And the worst movie,
so impressive.
Yeah, and the worst movie on Metacritic has a 57. It's only one lower than. It's two lower than the third movie, and it's one lower than another movie. It's Cars 2 is the worst rated, worst critically reviewed Pixar movie by like a country mile. It is a 40% on Rotten Tomatoes with 220 reviews. Like that's, I mean, like I've never seen it for the same reason you're saying it's not good, because it's not a good movie. Like, I don't know. I remember seeing the trailers and being like, what the fuck is this? Like, what? Well, that's the other thing that I feel like, I don't know where we would have this conversation, but I feel like you kind of broached it already with the sequel thing. I, for the life of me, don't really find the sequels to be better than just the one-offs. I think the one-offs are better, like a Ratatouille, like an Inside Out. Like, yeah, Toy Story 3 is amazing. I have yet to see Toy Story 4, but Toy Story 3, like, that's a great movie. I actually think that the emotional core of that movie is pretty strong, but I genuinely find the movies that aren't a thing in a universe of things tend to have a little bit more room to have an interesting conversation, like a Coco, like an Inside Out, like a Ratatouille even. Like, they're not a Toy Story movie, so they can kind of have more interesting things to say. I'm not saying Toy Story doesn't, but I didn't see Toy Story 4 because, like, I really didn't think there was anything left to say after Toy Story 3. Like, do you know what I mean? I felt like I was like, that's... I don't know. And that's the way I look at these movies in a lot of ways. Like, the movies that aren't sequels are better in a lot of ways. Like, I don't think any of the sequels have surpassed the originals either.
And that's, I would mostly agree. I've never been hyped that a Pixar sequel was coming out.
Right.
However, I think I prefer Toy Story 2 and 3 to the first one.
Interesting. I mean, I get that. Like, I get it.
It's not just due to the animation. Like, I genuinely think Toy Story 2 is probably a perfect film. And Toy Story 3, I think the first and the third act are really like top, like maybe some of the best things Pixar has ever done. That second act is just so... It's a slog. It's a little bit of a, why are we doing this sort of thing? Like, I don't need to see Buzz Lightyear just speaking Spanish. That's a silly, weird thing to go on that. When you're leading up to the emotional resonance of all of these toys accepting their fate of death,
I know.
That's a weird lead up to that. And so I think the second act is kind of out of place there, but it's hard for me because I love Toy Story, and even the fourth one I think was really great. Took my entire family to see it in the theater. I think it has some of the best animation we've ever seen. There's an opening. It's either the exact opening scene or the first like 3 minutes. I'm not sure. It's been since that day that I saw it. They animated a rainstorm in a way that I would have believed anybody that said this is not animated at first.
Interesting.
It was astonishingly well made.
And so that's the thing. Like, I think Toy Story is the exception that proves the rule, because like we've said, like they take their time with the Pixar. Like, Pixar takes their time with Toy Story versus everything else. So I think Toy Story is probably the exception that proves the rule here, because like all the other sequels have been middling. Like you said it yourself. Incredibles 2, not necessarily great. Cars 2, I mean, I think you were one of the worst Pixar movie. I think people would agree with you. Yeah. And Cars 3 wasn't necessarily super well received either. So it does seem like even then with the sequels, Toy Story is the one that all of the time and effort's being put into.
The other one, though, I would say, that which we haven't mentioned yet, Monsters University is a very, very acceptable follow-up. And I think the only reason that is incredibly different is because it's a prequel. It's something that takes a completely different story, turns it on its head, which I this is where I agree with you. Like, I understand that Toy Story 2 and 3 are meaningful to me, but again, when they announced Monsters University, I didn't cheer. I wasn't like, yeah, they are going back to, I get to go back to this, universe. I don't need a prequel for any of these other films. I don't need to hear about Flick from Bug's Life and where he came from, 2 weeks prior. Right. I don't need to dive more into Coco's story after he learned his lesson here.
Right? It just doesn't, nothing that they've done necessitates it.
That is the only part to me that feels like they've kind of taken a page out of Disney's books here.
Yeah. What, making sequels, you mean?
Making sequels. We don't need to go down to that well. If you have the ability to write these original stories, I kind of wish you just would.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, again, it's not like the sequels are bad. It's just, I don't like, you could be doing something original and it would probably fare better because the original things tend to, like, they're all well regarded is my point, but like there are plenty of movies later on that are 90s and 95s that are not a Toy Story or a Cars movie. Inside Out, The Good Dinosaur still has 75%. Coco, Onward, Soul, Luca, Turning Red. None of those have anything to do with Toy Story. You're probably going to see them because you love Pixar because of Toy Story, but like they're not that. Like, I'm shocked we're getting an Inside Out too. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a weird one.
But again, like, it does make sense now because, like you said, if they're following the lead of the biggest entertainment company on the planet, it worked for them.
You know what's wild is I just realized there's, I think, only one Pixar film we haven't named at all tonight. And we really got to shout out, I really thought Brave was kind of incredible. And Brave is one that I really think that they could have exploited for a super long franchise. And I'm kind of surprised they didn't because the Brave franchise kind of feels like it's already out there in How to Train Your Dragon. A lot of the same story beats and character animation types and, the universe kind of feeling is out there with How to Train Your Dragon from a different studio. But Brave is really well done, really great female-fronted Pixar film. Really well animated too. That's the thing. That movie was gorgeous.
I haven't seen it. I've always wanted to. Like, yeah, it's just I didn't necessarily keep up with Pixar after a while. Like, I just recently saw Inside Out. I have not seen Toy Story 4. I have not seen Luca or Soul, but I know that they're good. Like, I know people that like both of those movies. But for me, it's like, again, like, I don't even have to question the quality for the most part. That is what you get with Pixar that you can't really, I mean, guess you can with Disney, but Pixar, there's going to be a level of quality to these movies. That's, again, even with something like Brave, like, they chose not to do it. I don't know why, but they could have because they're good. Even the sequels are fine. They're not amazing in some respects, but they're still fine. And sometimes I think I would probably agree with you. Toy Story 3, I think, is the best Toy Story movie, better than the first one and better than the second one. I don't know if that's as far as you would go, but for me, Toy Story 3 felt like the right message at the right time for someone my age. And that's why I resonated with it as hard as I did.
Yeah, like I said, I think Toy Story 2 is a full-blown perfect movie. So I would say that is the best one in my opinion. But I think Toy Story 3 is higher highs.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a lot more emotionally manipulative, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, again, we don't complain about it when Pixar does it, but it's effectively, it's the same as a fucking jump scare. Like, you're just trying to get the audience to a point that you want to get them at. And Pixar does it better than anybody else. They do it so subtly through just smart writing.
That's true. And they nail it most of the time.
Yeah, like 26 times out of 27.
All right, then. That leads us to our final question, which I know that we've alluded to a lot of other animation, but I've not brought up my answer for this one yet. So anybody that has somehow lived their entire life and never seen a Pixar film, what would bring them some sort of relative sort of interest in these if they were already a fan of something else? So Disney, I think, is the obvious one that people would go to, but I would love to hear what you're going to say.
I mean, I feel like it's kind of unfair, and we've already kind of mentioned it, but early DreamWorks stuff doesn't have the heart of the Pixar stuff early on, or even late Pixar stuff, but they have so many movies that I think are amazing on their own right. Because again, Prince of Egypt, not terrible. Road to El Dorado, not terrible. Ants, not terrible. I mean, a weird movie, but not terrible. And then you've got all the stuff of Shrek and Madagascar and Wallace and Gromit. And like, again, even something like a B movie or Kung Fu Panda. Like, what's crazy is, are they a lesser of DreamWorks, or is Pixar lesser than DreamWorks? No. Is DreamWorks lesser than Pixar? I guess. But at the same time, you could see people making the case that that's not the case anymore, because DreamWorks comes out with shit every year. Like, they're not waiting. But I mean, Pixar kind of doesn't either. It's just DreamWorks does the thing more often than Pixar does, which is making sequels, right? Like making full-blown sequels, like 5 Shrek movies, and plus 2 Puss in Boots spin-off movies, 3 Trolls movies. Like they just go. They're not like worried about it the same way Pixar is. So that would be my answer, is like stuff from DreamWorks Animation. And if we're talking specifically, I think the first Trolls movie is actually pretty good. I'm not one of those people that hates Trolls. I understand the hatred for Trolls, though. I find Rise of the Guardians to be a rather interesting and fun Christmas movie that gets forgotten. That's the one with Chris Pine playing Jack Frost. Is that right? Yeah, and Alec Baldwin. Is Alec Baldwin as Santa, I think? That's not a great person to pick. Yeah, it is Alec Baldwin. Yeah, stuff like that. Like, and even a Kung Fu Panda. Like, Kung Fu Panda is kind of a Pixar movie. Like, it's a very close approximation of something Pixar could have done. And those, I think, are the successful DreamWorks movies, are the ones that are like, this is as close as you guys are going to get to doing a Pixar thing. So like Shrek, right. Shrek in a lot of ways is the movie I think Pixar wishes they would have been able to make, which is like some crass humor. Because that's the thing we haven't mentioned. Like, Pixar doesn't have crass humor. Like, Pixar is I don't think Pixar movies are funny per se, but they're lighthearted. Like, DreamWorks stuff, I think, tries to be funny, like genuinely funny.
Certainly.
So that's my answer, is just like anything from DreamWorks. But I mentioned so many things now that are worth checking out that equally have been kind of lost to the animation bin of time, like Monsters vs. Aliens, not terrible. Flushed Away, equally not terrible. And again, I think that Puss in Boots, The Last Wish, is a fucking amazing movie. Better than almost anything DreamWorks has ever done. And I would go as far as to say it's as good as a Pixar movie. If not, in a lot of ways, better than a lot of the recent stuff that I've seen Pixar make. So that's a fucking hot take for you. You're welcome.
Wow. I would agree for the most part with most things that you said there. This is not my answer, though. For me, my big thing with Pixar is that hearty, emotional core to all of these films. And I don't think I've gotten that from most of the DreamWorks films. So I'm going to go back to a hand-drawn animator that was a huge, huge part of my life. And I hope that we can do an episode on this guy eventually. And I'm going to say, if you are a fan of any movie directed by Don Bluth, you would love stuff from Pixar. So if you're not familiar with Don Bluth, this is the guy that gave us The Secret of Nim, An American Tail, All Dogs Go to Heaven, Land Before Time. Anastasia is probably my favorite from him.
You
but he also
literally overlooked it on purpose, didn't you? You overlooked Rockadoodle on purpose, you monster.
I was about to say, he's also the guy that gave us Thumbelina, Troll in Central Park, and Rockadoodle, and The Pimple and the Penguin, which those are not good. I don't.
Oh, I see what it was. It's not that I wasn't going to mention it. I'm just going to make sure to lump it in with all the other things that aren't great. Fair.
So, Don Bluth animation, first off, is remarkable. If we're only going to talk about animation, there's not a lot of Disney animated things that I've sat in wonder and stared at, because I wasn't there when they first were made and I wasn't used to it. So I was there when we needed to raise the bar a little bit. And Don Bluth's animation does it. The rotoscoping that they use in a lot of his films make it feel tangible that a lot of Disney movies just never were able to capture. And even some of the things that I would say are the objectively prettiest Disney films from the modern era, even like Moana. The water done in Moana looks amazing. It's very well animated. The rest of the movie, I'll take it or leave it. It's not like astounding. But there are shots from Anastasia that I still go, holy shit, they made this when, and they were able to make it look like that. This is amazing. So animation-wise, I think they compete with Pixar as far as like being mystifying for me. But the other thing is he was able to write characters with depth in a way that you are emotionally captured in these films. And the crazy thing, because he wasn't held back by Disney, he's got like actual hot takes in some of his films. He's got some scary things. Even Secret of Nim, the owl that you face in Secret of Nim is genuinely really creepy. There's spiders that you go, oh, holy shit, like this is kind of crazy to watch, especially if you're watching this as a child when it comes out. But I mean, he's tackling things like the way that we treat the Jewish people in America in An American Tale. The way that we are able to, discuss the afterlife in All Dogs Go to Heaven. The way that people feel othered in a handful of his movies. Many of them are just like that. Anastasia, talking about what we know now to be a completely false historical epic, but we are, at least able to discuss, finding your true self and discovering family that has been lost your entire life in a unique and interesting way. So Don Bluth films, to me, are still special, still well made, still done in a way that I think can capture audiences. And I got to admit, my kids love a lot of the Don Bluth films a lot more than they've loved a lot of those Disney films.
I mean, I guess I could have also said in the same vein of what you're saying, like to take it maybe away from like the contemporaries of Pixar. Ralph Bakshi's stuff is similar to Don Bluth. I mean, it's a lot rougher. It's a lot more subversive. And I don't think Pixar could ever be that subversive because of the corner they've kind of painted themselves into, as much as they may attempt to be subversive, and they can be from time to time. But like you mentioned with Don Bluth, like Ralph Bakshi working outside of the system, doing his own thing, making some, again, truly bizarre things, like really bizarre movies like Wizards or Coonskin or there's one where it's like a singer and he's performing music throughout like time. You know what I'm talking about? We covered it on the show.
American Pop.
Yeah, American Pop. Like that's not a Disney movie, but it's being made at the same time Disney is doing all of their animated stuff. So it's a contemporary of Disney, and Disney are contemporaries of Pixar as well as being, the company that owned them now. So, yep. And that's the thing, like you mentioned with Don Bluth. Don Bluth he did his own thing. Bakshi did his own thing. I think Don Bluth is infinitely more successful in having mainstream appeal, but some people really like those Ralph Bakshi, the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings, which is pretty good. So, yep. He has a shorter list of things, I think is the problem, but yeah, that's a good answer. That's a good answer, Don Bluth. Yeah, it's a good one. I would agree. I would 100% agree.
I love Don Bluth. I happen to be lucky enough in 2023 to be on an episode of the Directors Club podcast and discuss his whole filmography. It's one that I think is ripe for reevaluation, and for the most part, they're still really great. He did have a couple of duds back to back, and I get that he lost some fans along the way there, but I think there's still enough that you can come back and argue it is well worth watching every single thing he's ever made. I
mean, I've seen most of them. I've seen most of the 90s stuff, so I've seen The Land Before Time. I've never seen the original American Tale. I've seen the sequel, Fievel Goes West, but like I was kind of chiding you about Rockadoodle, like I saw that movie. So I've probably seen that movie more than I've seen any Pixar movie. I used to watch that all the time. Movie. I love it though, because it is so unabashedly fucking weird. Like it is Glenn Campbell as a singing Elvis Brewster. Like that, if that doesn't get you excited immediately, I don't. And Charles Nelson Riley is in it. Fucking Chris Plummer plays a giant. Speaking of terrifying and really creepy, a massive owl is played by Chris Plummer, and Ellen Greene is in it as well. Like it's not a great movie, but it's a fucking weird movie, and Disney would never make something like Rockadoodle, and never in a million years.
Well, you know what's got to happen now. You got to watch the rest of Bluth's films, and we got to do an episode on them.
I guess so. I mean, those are heavy hitters. Like we've mentioned, just looking at the list of things, like Anastasia has such a big cult following still. Like
I love that movie.
I haven't seen it in a very long time. I remember it used to scare the shit out of me because of Chris Lloyd's Rasputin, because he's
so good.
I know, and it's got John Cusack in it doing like a okay performance. Like I think any of the male characters in any of those Prince characters kind of get short shrift, but that's fine. Yep. It's an Anastasia movie. Patrol in Central Park. Now yeah, you brought it up though. You don't like it. It's not.
I watched Patrol in Central Park for the first time last year, and oh man, not good.
No. I mean, did you think it was going to be good though? Did you think there might be a chance?
The hard part here is my wife has good taste for the most part, and she has raved about it because it was her childhood film. She was like, "This is one of my favorites from when I was younger," and I watched it and I was like, "It was."
Yeah. Well, I mean, Charles Nelson Riley plays Lort. That's troll backward. That's troll backwards. That's like Nilbog. Don't you know Nilbog? Don't you piss on my hospitality? Fucking Christ! I always that's a Dom DeLuise, because isn't Dom DeLuise Stanley the troll?
And he's in most of Don Bluth's early stuff.
Like, I mean, Dom DeLuise is fine.
He is hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah, we should do an episode on Don Bluth. I only have to watch like a couple more. Bartok the Magnificent.
I probably saw it when I was younger. I do not remember that at all.
And he made that movie too. It's not like, that's wild. That's wild. Yeah. Don Bluth's a good answer. I think anybody who does animation would be a good answer, but specifically Don Bluth, I think, is a great answer.
Yeah, he is maybe maybe I shouldn't say that without thinking about it well, but I would say he's probably my favorite animation director of all time.
I mean, I can see that. Like I said, some of these movies I know have a lot of quality pieces to them, and some of them are quality throughout. So
I agree. Man, this has been a fun one. Pixar was huge, and I really feel like we kind of nailed it.
I think so. I think we, in the process of this entire episode, have mentioned every single Pixar movie.
Literally.
Have we? We have, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Because I wanted to make sure, because there aren't too many to not mention all of them. But I think we have gone through the entire. I think we've gone through the entire catalog by the end of this now.
Well, let's throw some other things out there. Maybe some, quick quips about some of these for us. Any that are super unsung or underrated that you think people should check out?
I haven't seen enough of the new stuff to have an opinion on essentially anything from Soul forward, other than seeing like 2/3 of Turning Red. I really would implore people to just go rewatch like Bug's Life. Like, it's like really like it's one of those movies that, again, like it's a really early Pixar movie, but everything about it is still really, really fun. Right. And I don't know, I think Onward is fun also. I think Onward kind of got lost in the shuffle of like The World in March of 2020. Like, what a time for that movie to come out. What a actual horrible time for that movie to come out. So I would actually say Onward might be my answer, because I feel like not enough people have seen Onward, and it's pretty good. And Chris Pratt is
Tom Holland.
Yeah, like that alone should get you through the door. And I'm not the biggest fan of Chris Pratt anymore. The person, him as an actor, I think he kind of can be one note, but I know he's very charismatic. And in Onward, he plays a character, and this is a funny story. I had blue hair at one point in 2020, and my possible niece called me Barley because I had blue hair, so I am now Uncle Barley to her. Unironically, like she was like, he looks like Barley from Onward. And so like that was enough. So probably, honestly, as much as I want to beat the drum for Bug's Life, like Onward, I think kind of got forgotten because of the pandemic, because it came out like the weekend before the pandemic happened. Yep. So yeah, it didn't even make its money back, which is a fucking shame. Like, because again, I think Onward is a fun, interesting movie.
Yeah, it's a good take, and one that really hasn't been super covered in a lot of the other Pixar films. Really great sibling story. You took the one I was going to say, surprisingly enough, so I'll shift it to the other pandemic movie, and I'll go to bat for Luca, because I think, to be honest, I think this is a borderline masterpiece film. I think that it's animated in a really interesting way. It's a unique story that blends, the bringing these random things that you would not expect to see animated to life, which doesn't exist, obviously, with somebody being a shapeshifter in a way. But the underwater scenes are great. The way that they capture the culture of Italy really shows the way that they are embracing these micro genres of culture in a very fascinating way. And it's a fun story, and it's so interestingly told, and it's small. That's one of the other big things that I kind of love about Pixar is it's like the opposite of the MCU problem. We had to bring it up, so I wanted to shed light here. It's every single MCU movie fails because it has to be the biggest stakes possible, but a lot of the Pixar movies are just, no, one person's going to have a bad day if this happens. And so it is small in scope and done in a way that is more relatable. I can't relate to a planet being ruined. That doesn't change my life. I'm not going to feel invested in that. But leaving some toys behind. Yeah, I've faced that before. Having a rocky relationship with your sibling and then, finding each other again as you get older. Yeah, I've literally faced that. I can embrace these films a lot more.
I'm with you. Turning Red is another great example of
yeah.
That's one of those ones that it is a literal microcosm of a movie. And I honestly, like I said, I think Pixar's doing their best work when they're just doing a thing. And you know what? Encanto would have been a better movie if Pixar had made it.
Oh, 100%.
It would be the movie, it was fine, but it was not the movie that I was sold, even after I watched it and someone told me the way it was sold to me initially still wasn't the way it was everything plays out. And then I watched it and I was like, you're right, it's just way more boring. It's just, I don't know, Encanto feels like the kind of movie that if Pixar made it, while things wouldn't be happening necessarily throughout, at least it would be a more emotionally impactful story. Because again, Pixar doesn't even use the music to tell those emotional stories anymore. They use the dialogue. And it's these are movies ostensibly for kids, theoretically. But the adults are really the ones getting more out of it. That's the truth. Especially people our age that are having kids or have kids. You can show your kids Inside Out and they'll be like, oh, it's a great movie. But the adults in the room are crying. It's why are mommy and daddy crying? It's because the emotional core of the movie doesn't necessarily resonate, like you've said, until you get older. And yeah. I've seen all of the Pixar movies aside from the sequels and their new stuff. And yeah, I think we've really covered everything that anyone would have any idea to get into with Pixar. But the first 5 movies ain't a bad place to start because it kind of covers everything in and of itself, including a sequel, a sequel that's good, if not great, with Toy Story 2. Right. So, yeah, not going to be 27 if we do Don Bluth. It was 10. It's a third as much, but that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, makes choosing the answers for that a little easier, even though his stuff is such quality, it will still be difficult.
Right. Oh, yeah. No, I'm with you. And yeah, I think it's funny that we actually got through every single movie somehow. Because again, I think each one of them deserves a conversation about them because some of the new stuff is so weird and specific and esoteric that, again, you might have to sell someone on the idea of Turning Red. And I would understand if a cisgendered white man doesn't want to watch Turning Red, but you should because it's a fucking great movie.
For sure.
Yeah. No, this has been fun. This was a fun episode to do, and I look forward to when we get to talk about more a wider expanse of things. Do you know what I mean? Because we didn't have the same answers for the most part, which I think is interesting.
Absolutely. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed that and tunes in for the next episode, which I'm sure will be quite interesting for you all to hear. If you are interested, please give us a follow on all the socials. And what else should we shout out here, Chris?
What you work on with Disconnected, what I work on with Weirding Way Media. You do a show every Thursday. I post every Wednesday. There you go. That's it.
Weirding Way Media is going to get the super shout out tonight. There's shows for any type of film lover on that network that you could find. Please go check it out. There's something there for you if you are hearing this for the first time. Something there for your family. Something there for your friend that is super, super obsessed with Columbo.
Right? Yeah, ain't that the truth?
All right. Thank you for that, and we'll see you on the next one.